Hey everybody, Sarah at Nova Motorcycles again. And this week we have another special Japanese motorcycle, one we haven't done yet actually, and it is the Suzuki GT750 Water Buffalo, also known as the Kettle in the UK, and I think Australia maybe call it the water bottle. Anyway, they all have different nicknames, different marketing thing. But here in the States, actually also called the Le Mans, for good reason. But here in the States, it was called the Water Buffalo. And the reason it was called the Water Buffalo, or names like Kettle or Water Bottle, is because it is a liquid-cooled motorcycle. This was the first Japanese liquid-cooled motorcycle to be made. And I believe, I'm going on a limb here, I'm going from memory, but I believe the only other one we're talking about would be the Scott, which is an English two-stroke built way back starting in the teens. So it's kind of interesting that a lot of early water cooling of motorcycles at least involved two strokes, heavily on the two-stroke side, if not limited. So this bike is a 750cc three-cylinder two-stroke, kind of an anomaly. If you know anything about other two-strokes of the era, you immediately think of three-cylinder two-strokes. You think of Kawasaki, the H1 500, the H2 750. This was built around the same time. You could say maybe it was a response to it. Maybe they were all doing a similar thing. I don't know the actual corporate espionage details of why they built it, but it came out right around the time of the H2, early 70s, and it's kind of a different bike though. It's very similar to the Suzuki's 500, the T500, the Titan or the Cobra in other markets, and both of these bikes were built, the 500 and the 750, were built more as touring bikes, believe it or not, rather than the sort of the road burners that the H1 and the H2 were. Not necessarily known as the Widowmaker like those other bikes are. Also, just not quite as fast. They're heavy. But you know, that's to say they're not quite as exciting, but they were a little more reasonable, a little more rideable, smoother. Didn't try to vibrate you alive, and perhaps maybe a little more reliable with the water cooling on this one, on the 750. They were kind of, technically interesting. They had a reburning thing where they tried to reburn some of the exhaust gases. If you know anything about the history of why we don't run two strokes anymore on street bikes, EPA regulations just made them, they're so smoggy, so smoky, so many unburnt fuels that get burned through them just by the nature of two-stroke design and function, that these had an attempt at actually reburning it, which was kind of cool. Nonetheless, they died. I think 77 was the last model year. Regulations really kicked in. And all the two strokes kind of went by the wayside for the most part, except for some smaller ones, 350s and stuff. This is a 76, so almost the end of the run, and it's here for kind of a major go through. I mean, it's a pretty nice bike, but he's got complaints about it not running right, smoking a lot, dripping some stuff, and we just did a cursory inspection on it and did a compression test on it, and it is not looking good. There's 60 psi on two of the cylinders and 90 on one of the other ones. On the other one, I mean, all of those are terrible numbers, even for a two-stroke. So we're going to have to go into the top end. We'll have to do a crankcase compression test to make sure that the crank itself is okay. But beyond that, it mostly seems like just chassis stuff. You'll notice flat tires. It's been sitting for quite a while. The brakes are seized, so it's a bit of a bear to push around. But it's not terrible. It hasn't been off the road forever. Tires on are actually relatively new. So we're hoping we can get away with just a fresh top end on it and just a general chassis freshen up, which is not a huge deal. What else to say about these things? They are in my world of loving vintage racing. These do have a good history. If you're familiar with Barry Sheen, he raced a factory version of one of these and had a quite exciting get off at Daytona where he had a terrible accident where the wheel came apart and the whole bike, the banking. He just went down hard at about 170 miles an hour or so. I always think about those. They are tunable. We race with a guy in the club who has one. It is the loudest bike we've ever seen on the track. And he's got you can tune them up, lighten them up, and they actually go pretty well. So they're not terrible. I also have a longtime acquaintance of mine who is a huge collector, over 100 motorcycles, has everything from early teens Harleys and Excelsiors to modern bikes. And I asked him one day what his favorite motorcycle was, and he said his I don't know what it was, 70-something GT750, and I couldn't believe him, but he rode by on it, and he just loved the thing. So there's something to be said for bikes that aren't just outright power. Don't do everything well, but do a lot of things. Don't do anything perfectly, excuse me, but do a lot of things well. And this is one of those bikes. Smooth, definitely fast enough, and a pleasure to ride. So yeah, if you have any experience with these things, please let us know in the comments. We love hearing this stuff. This era of motorcycles, the 70s, there was just a lot of stuff happening. You know, the Brits were dying, the Japanese were coming in with like more crazier designs, liquid cooling. You know, Honda soon after came out with the CX500 liquid cooled, but a pushrod liquid cooled 4-valve motor. Another story for another time, but just weird stuff was happening. A lot of stuff was changing. And you really see a bunch of cool stuff happening. So I like to see these. I like to work on them. Not sure I'd want to own one just yet, but maybe someday a race bike version would be on my list. Um, yeah. Anything else you know about them? Let us know. And as usual, thanks for watching, and like and subscribe if you haven't yet.